So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the discussion hosted by the Goethe-Institut about the cultural scene in North Africa and the Middle East. My name is Jörg Schumacher. I work with the Goethe-Institut in Ramallah, and I would like to introduce our panelists for today's session. So first of all, we have Nada Sabet on the left side of the podium. Nada Sabet has a bachelor degree in dramatics and psychology from University in Cairo, and she has a master's degree by Goldsmith College in London on cultural management. She's co-founder and one of the initiators for meetfool.net, which is a performance art platform in Egypt, which was established last year. And she's the artistic director of Noon Creative Enterprise, another setup cultural initiative from Cairo from this year. On the other side of the podium, we have Lubna and Joseph. Lubna Juqqa has a bachelor's degree in English and Spanish literature. She worked in a cultural venue called Café des Artistes and organized several discussions and exhibitions for artists in the local community in Amman, Jordan. And since last year, she is the program manager of Al Balad Theater in Amman in Jordan, right? And on the right side of the podium, we have Joseph Fahim, who's not a cultural manager, but a cultural journalist. He has a degree in communication. He's a film critic. He lectures film criticism, and he's since yesterday appointed as senior editor of Variety Arabia, one of the biggest magazines in the region on culture, art, and film. And yeah, we're very happy to have the three of them with us today. The idea of the discussion today, as we're in the educational forum, is to take a look about the training program the three of them participate in right now, and to take a closer look mainly on the cultural scene and the cultural activities in the Arab region since the political events of last year, and to take an in-depth and a closer look to cultural infrastructure and cultural projects between Europe and the Middle East so far. The three of them are participating in a program organized by the Goethe-Institut. This is why they're in Germany currently, and not only today, but for several weeks. Joseph Fahim is here since 6 weeks, since beginning of September, in a cultural journalism training, which took place in Munich and in Berlin in September. He's in Berlin right now, writing as a film critic, and will come back to Berlin in February next year January for the Berlinale. Lubna and Nada are participating in a cultural management training organized by the Goethe-Institut, which is taking place in Berlin and Hamburg. And yeah, they just started their training 2 weeks ago. So we've got some possibility to speak about their experiences in Germany and the training program, of course, as well. I would like to start with Nada. It's like, Nada, how do you describe your career as an art manager or cultural manager in Egypt? You started with a degree in psychology, and you ended up in theater. Can you give us an impression as like how did you seek your career in cultural management? And do you see yourself more as an artist or as a cultural manager?
Hello. I don't know, I guess I'm both an artist and a cultural manager, which probably means I'm not very good at either. But I started off with a degree in psychology, and halfway through my studies I started working in the theater at university, and I called my parents up and I was like, you know what, I'm staying one more semester, it's not going to cost so much money, can I? And I will study theater as well. And they were like, yeah, do whatever you want. We wanted you to do business anyway. So I ended up with a degree in psychology and theater. And I started working with both. So I did a lot of work with using theater with disability, with children with learning difficulties, to kind of work on an alternative form of learning for children who couldn't read and write yet or were delayed in school. And then at one point I started doing less of the psychology and more of the theater. And then that's kind of how I got into cultural management. I realized that within Egypt specifically, there wasn't a lot of there were a lot of people that wanted to do arts but didn't have the know-how on how to get money to do what they wanted or how to write down their projects. So I started doing more of the management, and from that I still do a show at least once a year just to make sure that I'm still an artist and not purely a cultural manager. But then we also showcase works from other people in music, dance, theater and circus from Egypt, and with the platform from the region. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Speaking about this platform, it's like there's two things I came across this like when studying your CV. That's the meetfool.net and it's the Noon Enterprises. Meetfool is a game with language already, so it works in English and in Arabic. Maybe you can like meet fool as the traditional dish of the Egyptians. It's beans. And in meat, something like 100 beans, if I'm not mistaken, and of course the English saying about like meeting fools, I guess. So maybe you can you give us an introduction what Meetfool.net is about? It's a platform. It's described as a platform for the performing arts. So I see it's an idea of sharing the experiences and announcing and connecting people working in the same field. How did you develop the ideas? Like, who do you work together with, and what's the result after a year of Meetfool? How is it running?
Okay, I think you described it pretty well. It's an online platform for the performing arts. It's for professionals that work in theater, dance, music, and circus. And the concept came from this need to create websites and online presence for people that work in the performing arts in Egypt specifically. And I realized that it was a problem with most young, independent performing arts professionals within the region. So the idea is that you can put up what you do with videos and text, and it links your projects to who you are, to the events you're hosting or you're part of, as well as it also links people. So if I've worked with Joseph on a show, it'll show on both of our on both of our profiles. That was basically it. A year into it. It took us a year to develop it. It started as a little project that was funded by the EU in collaboration with a very small organization in Cairo that has nothing to do with culture. It's an environmental organization. And we partnered to kind of start it. And once the grant was over, we had the platform. We did the launch, and I set up Noon Creative Enterprise, which is a company based in Cairo that works on the performing arts sector to develop the sector, and also works with the performing arts for more educational purposes and awareness, more with children and youth and less with professionals. And so Meetfool kind of became a project under Noon that catered to the performing arts sector.
I think we will discuss the performing arts sector in Egypt in a second, but I would like to ask the other Egyptian on the panel, Joseph Fahim. It's like you're not organizing art, but you write about art and you write about films in specific. Joseph Fahim was selected as one of the 11 the film critics from the Arab world by the internationally leading magazine Sign and Sight to submit his best of lists films ever. It's like it's a procedure which is repeated every 10 years. So he's not only the new senior editor of Variety Arabia, but he's one of the essential film critics from the Arab world. So when you and we'll speak about your view on films later. It's like, but when you write about the arts in Egypt, can you tell us is like your impression is like what did change in the last year?
That's difficult to answer, but I don't think anything, in terms of writing about art, nothing has drastically changed. What we're trying, I guess what the different thing that we were trying to do is provide an honest and comprehensive assessment of like the culture and art scene after the revolution. The problem is, after the revolution, most of the Western media's coverage of the art scene in Egypt and the Arab world, in my opinion, was very shallow, very one-dimensional, and it was all about jumping on the bandwagon of celebrating the revolution without assessing whether like the resulting art was good or not. And what I basically, like last year when I was with the Daily News Egypt, which then was the only independent English publication in the country, produced on a daily basis, what we were trying to do, and that was I was trying to do in the past 7 years, was offering an honest assessment whether like this art is good or not. And for me, it was reactionary and shallow and not that good, and that's what we tried to convey. But in terms of the writing itself, I don't think anything changed. We still have the same freedom. We still have we always try to break taboos. We always try to challenge the system, whether that was Mubarak or now with the Brotherhood. So in terms of writing or coverage, nothing much has changed. It's essentially remained the same.
We're speaking on the way to this fair, or to this hall actually, about the exhibition of Magdi El Shafi, which is on display in hall number 5, I guess. And it is still banned in Egypt, just like you told me.
It's still banned in Egypt, and I do believe it's going to remain banned, not because in a nutshell, Metro is the very first Egyptian graphic novel that was released, I think, in 2007. And a policeman decided to confiscate it just because he thought, one, it's immoral, it has some nudity in it, some very minor sex scenes in it, in the novel, and it challenged the system. It didn't have nice things to say about the NDP, the former Mubarak party, and Mubarak's son Gamal. And a policeman decided to confiscate it, and as a result, there was a travesty of a lawsuit that was filed against Magdi Shafi'i, and as a result, the novel has been to this very day banned. And I don't think it's going to be unbanned, not because the regime is gone, but because like the new regime might find it immoral because it had some nudity in it. And maybe you can have some nudity and sex in just like regular novels. There is still like that realm of freedom. When it comes to pictorial mediums, that still remains a taboo, and I think it's going to increase in now. And so for me, it was just a little bit surreal to see like this novel being sold in German shelves, and we still can't get it in Egypt.
So I understand you correct that you say it's like there's not such a big change in the conditions of working for you now compared to 2 years before. It's like they're the same structure of magazines, so it's like the media system, and you can write or not write whatever you could do in 2 years ago.
Listen, I cannot say that because I write in English, and I've been writing in English for the past 7 years and a half of my life. And when you're writing in English, you have more freedom. And now I'm the senior editor of a trade magazine, which is also like completely different. And we basically don't have censorship as well, so we can basically publish whatever we want to publish. And in Arabic, it's a different issue. You have more censorship, you have more pressures, and writing is now is changing. Now you find like editors of like big publications in Egypt are changing alliances from being with the system to now being with the current system, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. And so there is a tendency to be more conservative. There is a tendency not to touch upon religion. Basically, I think like the only difference between the Mubarak regime and the current regime is we still have the same taboos, except that during the Mubarak regime, we had like the taboo of politics. That was like you cannot talk about Mubarak, you cannot talk about his son, but you can basically, religion was still a taboo, but not as stern as it is now. Now it's probably going to be different. You still have space to criticize the Muslim Brotherhood and the current system but religion is becoming the new taboo, and I think it's going to increase.
Okay, thanks. Switching from Egypt to Jordan, maybe. So the working conditions in Jordan, I assume, didn't change so much in the last 2 years. As there is a form of, I think we can call it a political stagnation in Jordan. So there's the question would be is there an impact of what happened in the region to the cultural scene in Jordan, and very specific maybe from your experience in Al-Balad Theater. You're the program manager of one of the most interesting theaters in Amman. It's we'll speak about the cultural infrastructure and what else is there, as I guess is for a German audience. It's interesting to hear what is existing in as well Egypt as in Jordan in terms of cultural infrastructure, museums and contemporary initiatives like Makan and Darat Fulnoon and the others. But first of all, the question is, had the political development in the region an effect on your production in Al-Balad Theater?
Well, I'd say that what was happening in the political scene in the region for the last couple of years definitely had an effect on all the region. Jordan, as you said, is still politically stable to some extent, but yeah, I felt that the revolutions in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya, even in Syria, opened up new possibilities for cultural exchange and for more possible collaborations between countries. It's all about freedom of expression, I think. So revolutions were reason for more liberty in expressing more feelings towards humanity, nationalism. So yeah, as for Al-Balad Theater, we had in our yearly festivals many collaborations with Egypt especially, and also from Tunisia, and they were different. We always collaborate with them, but this time it was different. It was more intense. It was more powerful. This is my personal point of view.
That's very interesting. It's so you're saying that the degree of exchange within the region increased since the developments of the last years. Would the others agree on that? Do you feel a stronger connection to the region, or do you feel having splendid isolated cultural scenes in Egypt, Palestine, Tunisia, Jordan? We start with Joseph and then Nada, please.
For me, what's interesting is the exchange between Arab countries has actually collaborations between Arab countries have actually been there for many years. We have different festivals in Egypt, theater. We have a Biennale. We have dance. We have different and film, of course. So we did have lots of forums in Egypt where there could be an exchange of ideas between Arab countries, but mostly because they felt under the umbrella of governmental institutions, they were not only very restricted, but they were somewhat insubstantial. They were not they were not really for the audience. They were just for the sake of it, just to be part of the system, I guess. What has been happening the past couple of years, this was before the revolution, was more independent organizations sprang up, and so for instance, the Culture Resource, which is now one of the leading culture organizations in the region, that is, for the past couple of years or maybe 3 years, have been doing great collaborations between all sorts of Arab countries and workshops. It has to a certain. I think what has changed after the revolution is there is now more collaborations, as you said. In the past, there was just more of a forum where Arab countries or Arab artists can showcase their stuff. Now you see like different workshops where different Arab artists collaborate with each other to produce like homogeneous or one work, and I think that's what's changing after the revolution.
I agree. I mean, I think there is. I think the revolutions have kind of opened the space where people can dialogue, whether artistically or verbally. And I think for Egypt, we've been traveling a lot around Egypt, which was not so easy to do with art shows in the past that were not linked to the government. And now it's much easier. On schools and youth centers, and I mean, everyone wants, because it's cool at the moment to have all these artistic things move around. But I think also for artists and for people working, there's a curiosity to discover what's happening within the different governorates of Egypt and also within the different countries of the region. That's kind of become much easierly met, I think, now.
So, and one of the examples would be, I guess, the Hakaya Festival, which Al Balad Theatre in Jordan is organizing, which is one of the several platforms where artists from the region can perform and meet. It's about storytelling. It's a very specific art form, which lots of countries, including Palestine, Egypt, I guess, and Lebanon, and other neighboring countries and countries from the region participate. So, beside or additional to the inner Arab networks, it's like how do you see the cultural exchange with Europe or with other countries developing in the last years? Like, do you see any changes for that? Maybe I start with Lubna. It's like Hakaya Festival or other festivals of Al Balad have a strong component within the region. It's like, are you interested in cultural production and cultural exchange with partners from outside the region as well?
As for Hakaya Festival, it's a yearly festival organized by Balad Theatre in Amman, and it's about the centrality of the story in our culture and presenting the story in many different ways through art, through music, theater. This year it included a diverse number of countries from the region. From Egypt, we had a storytelling performance through theater and music. It was a beautiful mixture. We also had from Tunisia, from Lebanon, Palestine. We had from Libya, and also we had international performances from India and Ireland. So the point was at some point when all artists and all people were gathering in one place. It was, of course, the performances were all around Jordan, and we're thinking of making it in the region in the next couple of years, like a mobile festival. But it was in different places, outdoor and indoor, and the feedback, the public feedback was beautiful and.
How does it practically work for Al Balad Theatre? Maybe you can describe the audience a bit. It's like you have a theater, which is like it's a venue inside the city. It's like, and there's a show going on once every week, or it's like how practically is to get a more precise insight on cultural management in Amman or in Jordan and in the region. It's like, how does it practically work? You have this festival among like 4 or 5 other festivals during the year.
Yes, in the year.
Give us some information on the Balad Theatre for someone who has not been there yet.
Okay, so Al Balad Theatre is one of the most, let's say, how do you say it? Lost in words.
Unique? No.
Okay. Let's say from ever since I was small, I always thought Al Balad Theatre was the cultural place in Amman, the capital of Jordan. So we usually organize an annual program. It includes like 4 festivals, including Hikaya Festival, another festival we do in March celebrating Women's National Day. It includes also theater performances, dancing, and visual arts sometimes, exhibitions. We also have Al Balad Music Festival celebrating alternative independent artists from the region and the world in one of the most ancient venues in Amman. It's the Roman Amphitheater. Al Balad Theater is an open creative space welcoming all kind of established and emerging local and regional artists to hold their performances, exhibitions, or workshops. Every year we have a different program. This year we're really focusing on the emerging local artists to give them more space and possibilities to expose and showcase their art and have more possible opportunities to work better on their own art.
I think the work with the local communities is something which Nada is very interested in as well, with the educational approach of the Noon enterprises, right? It's like, so you told us at the beginning, it's like that this was one of the important ideas behind it, to have an educational approach. When you hear to what Lubna is telling about the performing art scene in Jordan to a European audience, how would you describe the performing art scene in Egypt in comparison?
I would say that in Egypt there are probably 2 parallel systems. One which is very government-based, that is part of the Ministry of Culture, that has quite a wealth of infrastructure that is unfortunately not in use or in very bad use or in decaying use, if that can be a term. And then there's another parallel stream of things that is composed of much younger performing arts professionals that are independent of government funding and actually mostly get either no money for what they do or foreign funding for what they do. So they would work with the Goethe's and the French Cultural Center and the British and so on. And I would say that for the past 10 years, this small, independent, young scene has been growing with a lot more training and a lot more possibilities for exchange and dialogue and work. For a country that's 90 million people, I would say we have 7 or 8 independent spaces for all these people to work in. So it's not much in comparison to the population, but it's a lot in comparison to that this didn't exist 10 years ago. So I would say that's where the action is. And I would say that people are working a lot more together, which is nice because I look at older generations and they really don't work together.
Would you recommend something like a platform that you created as a model for other Arab countries, like a meat fool for, I don't know, what's the national dish for the Urduni mansaf? Meat mansaf for the Jordanians?
Actually, I told Nada we have similar online platforms we have one for independent visual artists in order to expose their art and have better working opportunities. But yeah, we'd love to have that in.
But you don't need one. Meatful is for everyone. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not Egypt specific. It was born in Egypt, but I mean, there are no locks. When we launched it in the Mediterranean, so it was open for anyone from the region, but really anyone from the world can sign up and register or check. The difference between signing up and not is if you don't sign up, you can't put up your own work, but you can view the works of other people. And it's only for dance, music, theater, and circus, because when we started it, we felt that there was enough online platforms that cater to the visual arts, and that the visual arts, because we're more visual and less performative and live, were easier to also present online. So this one was for Meatful is for the performing arts specifically.
I just want to add one more thing is one of the things that we learned about like when we came here is like the system, the culture system, which is you guys either have like federal or state system, so that's like one system, and then there's the private system, which is like art being supported by private institutions or companies. We don't have that in Egypt. It's either governmental or independent. It's something in between. It's you were talking about the use, like the need for or like the extent of our collaborations with foreign organizations or like culture centers. That's like the bane of the independent culture scene now, without like foreign supports, foreign money, and now like regional that's coming out of places like the Culture Source, which also in many ways is supported by other foreign culture centers. Without it, probably the culture scene would be dead.
I would like to continue with that exact point. Actually, it's like, so you were speaking about cultural infrastructure funding and cultural policy, maybe as Joseph was. You were speaking about the umbrella of state institutions and about the festivals, and you were mentioning the division between the government-based art and cultural institutions in decay, or in like you have a physical infrastructure, but there's not so much going on, and the younger independent scene with like a continuous lack of funding, I guess, is like with the only possibility to receive foreign funding. During your stay here in Germany, it's like we spoke about funding, cultural funding, and Germany has a federal system of and it was part in the workshops and the training as well as like of compared to the region, incredibly high amount. It's like when you add up what the different counties are contributing to a cultural budget. But there's also something called corporate social responsibility. So there is at least the attempt of involving the private sector with all difficulties that might be attached with that one. But it's like there is a relevant contribution by private institutions like from banks and from other industry sectors. How's that in Jordan and Egypt? Is there any contribution by the private sector to art funding, and if so, how does it look like?
I think on the problem with, well, not the problem, but the independent scene is very young, and even the companies within the independent scene they're very small. So partnerships with banks is very unbalanced, because a bank is a huge company in comparison to a 3-person little theater troupe. We've been trying, I can speak personally, we've been trying to open up relationships with the corporate world. And so far we've gotten, I would say we still have a lot more work to do before we can really use CSR money. There's an interest, but I think we are slightly too small for some of the companies we speak to. I did speak to a few banks that were kind of promoting that. They were doing works with disability and street children, which were two areas we worked in. But it was too small. They wanted a huge event in the opera with huge visibility. They didn't really want to sponsor a workshop or a meeting. But I don't know. Now we both know of each other.
That's a problem in Germany sometimes as well. It's like Okay.
So I think we still have quite a path to kind of get to have CSR sponsoring the cultural scene.
Do you have different experiences in Jordan? Is there a stronger link between the cultural and private sector in Jordan?
Well, yeah, but I would say the same. It's the same case. Ballet theater is not linked to the government, and so it's private, and this means we are free of all censorship problems. But yes, we do work with the private sector, especially banks. But as Nada said, I find independent artists having the same problem. Now, we are an established institution working in culture for years now, so it's really much more easier because now everyone knows us. We have our connections, and they know, and we work on big clear cultural activities and events. But as for independent artists, they really it's a really hard time for them to find someone to sponsor them or to give them funds in order to move on in their projects. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be the link between the private sector and independent artists in Jordan for them to move on in their work.
So 2 days ago at another discussion here at the book fair, Frankfurt Book Fair, Khaled Al-Khamisi, an Egyptian writer who has a column in the Süddeutsche Zeitung as well regularly since years, like he was saying that for Egypt, speaking about cultural policy and the sorry, the attitude of the government towards the cultural scene is like he says there will not be any support for the cultural scene by the new government, and the oppression will remain. Would you agree or disagree on that, Joseph?
I would disagree.
Why that?
For sure. Look, I mean, culture is a very prominent tool for the government to give up. And under the umbrella of culture is like mainstream arts like film or music or different things. So, and I don't think you can separate the both. The former regime, the interesting thing about them is they totally crushed the culture, but at the same time they created their own form of, they created like the oppositional art as well, which is very controlled and very systematic and quite well known. The two examples that I mentioned like yesterday is there's some specific fields that the government might not be interested in because it will not, or the new regime will not be interested in because it's not going to give it, they don't have like any benefit from them, which might be, I don't know, like visual arts or other fields. Film, I think the new regime will be heavily invested in. From what I learned, I was reading a few days ago, there are now like big plans for a big film industry, and already the Muslim Brotherhood, they're like forming their sort of like own film production companies producing like small religious movies, and I think they're going to heavily invest in film. Maybe music. Now there's all kinds of a new line of religious music that I think are springing up soon. What would be interesting for me, like to observe, like the next, I don't know, couple of years or so, is how they're going to form their own oppositional arts. But they will, for sure. As I mentioned earlier, religion is a big taboo. It will continue to remain a big taboo, and even the political opposition that will be springing up will be very calculated. But no, I would never agree that they would totally give up their hands out of culture. It would be.
But it's a difference, I guess. It's like if either you support the independent cultural scene or if you invest in a cultural production which is sort of praising your policies. Like, so do you see do you see a continuation of something which might be described as a state culture
Yes.
under a new regime?
Yes, for sure. And as I said, it will be very calculated, very systematic. Again, like a recent example that, and this was like the big talk of like the town the past month or so, is the Cairo Film Festival, which is back in its heyday was the biggest festival in the region, and since I don't know, like the past 6 years, it has become utterly irrelevant and inconsequential and the laughing stock of the festival world, I have to admit. And they just like reinstalled the new establishment which were responsible for the downfall of the festival and everyone knows how are corrupted. And in addition, they put the top of the new director of the Cairo Film Festival is a very conservative, distributable film critic who is very well known for his like religious conservative tendencies. And despite the fact that the entire intellectual community has been enraged by this decision and by the fact and many like people inside the Cairo Film Festival, including the Cairo Film Connection, which is responsible for co-productions, they withdrew in protest of his appointment. Clearly, the new ministry has utter disregard for the intellectual community, and I think it's totally out of touch with the intellectual community. And basically, the new minister, from what we know, is not the brotherhood, but he has brotherhood tendencies, because clearly, like these days, you do not have to be brotherhood in order to be with the Muslim Brotherhood. But basically, you just have to appease to them, and you appease to policies and appear, you know, whatever you want to call it, in order to stay in power. And in order to stay in power, just be as aesthetically, religiously, politically conservative as you can be, and you will be fine. And I think that will remain the policy. As I said, I don't think the government will, it cannot withdraw its hand. It will form a culture policy, probably a hazy one. It might even like show some support for the independent culture scene, because it also, the culture is one of its tools to make it look good. And it will use it in a very strategic way. And by the way, and this is why like I totally disagree with Khaled al-Khamisi. I don't think the Brotherhood and the Freedom and Justice Party, I don't think they're that naive to give up on culture. They will use it in every possible way in their political discourse. And I think the next few months will, like, I think is going to see major changes inside the cultures and inside the Ministry of Culture and inside the culture scene as well.
So what changes are on the rise? It's like, what do you see?
Do you want to answer that, Anada?
You suggested that there was something.
As I said, I think like the Cairo Film Festival is one example with the appointment of Ahmed Atif, the new critic. I think, and again, this is my assumption, so I might be totally off, and I hope I proven wrong, but I think the prominent figures of the intellectual community will be sidelined further. I think new administrative figure will be in prominence inside the Ministry of Culture. There might be some progression in terms of developing culture centers outside Cairo. There might be more, they're probably going to develop the festivals a little bit further, but as I said, everything will be calculated. I think the choice of the performances and of the direction the festival will be going, this is going to change drastically. I think bit by bit, you'll see that like either like these festivals are going to lose their essence, or they're going to be made irrelevant altogether.
Maybe we stay in Egypt for another minute, and I would like to ask Nada, Sabet, do you see that there's a will or a wish of the Muslim Brotherhood to formulate something like a cultural policy?
I mean, I don't really work on the policy level, but I work on a very different scale with people and children. So it's kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum, and I can't say that we've been affected. I mean, we're asked to create self-expressive performative works in schools all around. I mean, and a lot of the time people assume that no, this area is a lot more conservative. Don't go there. And I'm always like, but why? I mean, we're talking about everyday issues that anyone can really share in. And people do participate and interact. So on a very people kind of level, I haven't felt any form of change. Well, change might be the wrong word in this context, but any form of resistance to what we do. In fact, I've been witnessing a lot more want for it. On a policy level, I know that there are a few groups that are working on pushing for pushing for specific things on a policy level that go from changing things on censorship to removing censorship altogether to removing the ministry altogether for a slow fizzle out of the ministry. I'm not quite sure where they're all at or how. I mean, they're in the news for a while and then they kind of fizzle out. So I don't know if at the moment they're in negotiation with the Brotherhood, but I know that they were with the former parliament, and that they were trying to push for it the day the parliament got dismantled. So I'm not quite sure what has happened since, but they're around somewhere.
Lubna, can I ask you, thanks for that one, and to think about, like, in the situation described, is like, where do you see the topics of a theater in Jordan and in Amman? It's like, what are the projects you're working on now, and what projects that you're going to develop in the situation that we discussed in the last 45 minutes? What will be the topics of Al Balad Theater in 2013?
Well, as I explained earlier, we try to cover all let's say vibrant topics. We don't have again, as I previously explained, we don't have any taboos. We're addressing every topic that's interesting to the public through theater. We don't really target particular topics, but basically this year I'll say that we have a couple of projects with local theater director and actress Lana Nasser. She's a feminist and she's an activist in the in feminism. She's working with the Swedish embassy on a project addressing the daily problems of underprivileged actually women in underprivileged areas that do not know their rights. So she's moving to those areas, and also she will host a couple of workshops. She will facilitate a couple of workshops at the Ballet Theater.
So new feminism as a topic for Jordan is like, how about Egypt? It's like religion is the new taboo, or will be the new taboo. What do you recommend to artists? You as a critic, is like, should they touch it or rather not?
Nada will start first as an artist, and then I'll comment.
I just want to point out that for the performing arts, I mean, for music there isn't much censorship except on words, or if you want to sell CDs and albums. So until you reach the phase of creating an album, there really is no censorship on what you say. Just because they can't really pin you down, they have nothing in writing. And the same for performing. For dance, obviously, it's very hard. There is no text to submit. And for theater, the script is usually sent to a censor office. If you are to perform in a state-run theater, the independent theaters do not require that you do that. So we're not really feeling it. However, the past 3 weeks, I think there was a lot of cases filed against writers for ازدراء الأديان, which is
Despising religion or insulting religion.
So I mean, yeah. Do you wanna take it?
Okay, what do you want to ask me again?
I'm curious about your comment. It's like, what's your advice to, like, for artists working in Egypt? It's like, should they rather not touch or tackle any religious topics, or should they?
Of course not. I mean, are you kidding me? Everyone, we should just like give it a go and end up in prison and just see what happens. Woohoo! Just one short comment about like the this, you know, like the new thing in the Egyptian courts, which is writers being filed lawsuit against about like insulting religion, which of course doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But anyhow, it's I think it's a fee-mongering tactic, and not just. Again, you have to realize just how smart the Brotherhood is, and maybe I'll turn out to be a Brotherhood phobe or whatever, but I don't care. But anyhow, basically, like the danger of the Muslim Brotherhood is not just with the establishment, it's with the followers. So it's basically, it's, as I said, like everyone, like all of these lawyers, just like filing random lawsuits, again, not just like writers, but writers and poets, and actresses and everyone that is remotely touching anything that has to do with God or religion, or even now the president, who is for like some people is being held now as a religious figure, or you know, like the general guide of the Muslim Brotherhood. So I think it's going to increase. Is it going to go anywhere? It's anyone's guess. And it's up to the artist to resist. But what do I advise the artist? I'm not an artist. I'm a critic, and now I'm probably gonna start like curating film and stuff. So, but personally, I've for the past 7 years and a half, I've never been afraid to discuss openly religion or sex or politics, and for me the most dangerous degree of censorship is not the censorship exercised by the government or by the regime, because that's going to continue and that might increase, but self-censorship. And if we reach a degree where artists are becoming afraid to express themselves and to challenge the system and to get into trouble, then I think we're roasted, and then this might be, for me, that culturally, then this could be the end of the revolution. And so resistance, of course, we have to resist every day, and again, not just by challenging the system. I was speaking to lots of filmmakers about like religion taboo, and I was kind of like distraught by the fact that they think it's okay. And no, and I still believe if you want to challenge religion in any possible way, I think you can. And look, before the revolution, and probably Nada would know that, for instance, there were some movies by a guy named Osama Fawzi, and this is like the kind of movies where you know, like a character goes up and say like he speaks to God and tells him that he doesn't love him and he doesn't get him, and I know this is gonna like fade out, and this is probably gonna be, you know, like it's gonna drown. But for me, the most important thing, not just like only like the degree of censorship, it's also independent artists. This is why more than ever, I think the next phase of the Egyptian culture is going to rely on the independent art scene, whether visual arts, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's anything. And here's the thing, independent is becoming the new mainstream now. And if we can push as further, and if we can support it as much as possible, and if we can champion it as critics, as writers, as you know, like regular liberal, secular intellectuals, then I think we're going to be okay for now.
I will remember the independent is the new mainstream, and I want to add on that as we have 2 more minutes to go. And I would like to thank, of course, the 3 of you very much. But before leaving the stage, I would like to get, I would like to know, it's like very quickly, it's like in your stay here or during your stay in Germany, which cultural production, be it independent or be it mainstream, impressed you the most? So I will start with, I start with the ladies who are just here 2 weeks, and we continue with Joseph. Nada, was there anything in the last 2 weeks which you said is like, wow, this I didn't expect, and this I'm taking back home, and I will think about that next year as well?
We've been, for the past 2 weeks, we've kind of been in seminars from 9 to 5, and then trying to catch the cultural scene from 6 to the to the wee hours of the morning. So I haven't really had time to kind of think of things. I've kind of just been bombarded with lots of things. So yes, I mean, there have been moments where I've had that thought, and sometimes it might not be really related to a product, but kind of a specific detail within whether it's things related to policy or things related to management or actual performances. So I won't bore you with a very long list.
And you have another 4 weeks to go minimum. It's like, do you, Lubna, very quickly, it's like, do you have anything, any art event, any concert, any exhibition, anything very specific where you say, wow, this really had an impact on myself and this I didn't expect?
Yeah, we really didn't have the chance yet to mingle and see many stuff. But we've been to a new modern production of Faust in Thalia Theater in Hamburg. That was amazing. I just loved it. I loved the vibe. I loved the vibe. I loved the energy. I loved the whole experience. It was great.
And we close the session with the critic, and I will ask him, it's like 2 sentences. It's like after your more than a month in Germany. Is there one specific art event that sticks to your mind and which you
Independent
remember?
in general.
Independent, mainstream, whatever.
Radiohead, of course, but that was not. That was not
fine.
German, but that's what's the most awesome thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But anyhow, no, there's been numerous, but 2. Can I say 3, please? 3. 1 is the Bunker. We went to see this amazing art space in Berlin that has the famous Ai Weiwei like branch thing, which was unlike any art space I've ever seen in my life and absolutely fantastic. We had the session with an amazing Swiss artist resident who happens to be German resident. I can not remember his name, but his first name is Milo. And he does, yeah, exactly. And he does probably, if we can take any of what he does in Egypt, I think we're in for a big revolution. But his concept of documentary theater and how like the manipulates reality with all of that. And the last thing, Festiwala, which is if you have the chance to go watch it, it's an Arab art festival for minorities in Berlin. It's absolutely fascinating and eye-opening.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much, Nada and Lubna. It was a pleasure to have you in Frankfurt. And thank you very much for listening and for attending.